The rejection heard across the stars in the heart of neutral space, where no sun cast light and silence reigned in every direction. The Galactic Assembly drifted like a jeweled crown in the void. Its structure was a marvel rings of silver orbiting, a translucent sphere alive with shifting lights, a place where decisions that shaped galaxies were made. Inside, species of every known civilization gathered to face a question unlike any before. Would humanity be welcomed as an ally or spurned as a threat? The atmosphere in the Hall of Verdicts was thick with tension. Delegates floated in levitation chambers, their forms bathed in soft light. Some resembled crystalline trees, others vast clouds of sentient gas. All turned their attention to the center stage, where a shimmering projection flickered to life. A human figure, alone, standing firm. Ambassador Raylan Voss, Earth's appointed speaker, had traveled light years to deliver this moment. Clad in a plain navy blue diplomatic uniform, he was neither warlord nor savant, but a man forged in survival and diplomacy. His voice echoed across species, translated instantly into thousands of tongues. "We do not come begging," Voss declared. "We come offering strength, an alliance, a future where we stand together or perish, divided." He paused. The silence that followed was not of hesitation, but evaluation. A chorus of blinking eyes, pulsing light, and flickering appendages signaled the gathering storm of judgment. The first to respond was High Speaker Zayek, of the Dravelin Order, a serpentine race whose history was etched into the stone tablets. Of 5 homeworlds, his voice slithered through the chamber. Your kind rose from a single planet and within a century pierced the veil of space. That alone would earn AR, but you bring with you the stink of war, of dominance, of unchecked curiosity. You wage battles not just to defend, but to win. That terrifies us. Voss didn't flinch. Curiosity built your tribes. War taught you peace. We are not so different. But Zayek had already looked away. One by one, representatives cast their votes, some with shimmering gestures, others with a mere pulse of light. Many spoke praises of Earth's ingenuity, its resilience, its unpredictable creativity. But many more spoke of fear. 1,000 light years away, back on Earth, the United Terran Command waited in silent anticipation. Families huddled in homes, soldiers stared at projection walls, students held their breath. No ships were deployed, no threats were made. Earth had placed its faith in diplomacy. Then, the final vote was tallied. A hologram projected into every Terran capital. It bore no smile, no warmth, only the cold certainty of rejection. The Terran proposal is hereby denied. Earth shall not be welcomed into the Galactic Assembly at this time. The words hit like a meteor dot in the command center beneath the Andes. General Aria Quell, head of Earth's Interstellar Defense Directorate, stood unmoving. Her silver-streaked hair fell around eyes that had seen too many battles. Around her, officers broke into quiet curses or collapsed into their seats. She turned to the council with only one command: prepare contingency protocols. Operation Iron Resolve is live. In orbit, the orbital fleets began silent maneuvers, not in retaliation, but preparation. No one would say it aloud, but Earth had been ready for this, hoped otherwise, but ready. Meanwhile, Raylan Voss remained in the hall even as the chamber emptied. Only one delegate lingered behind, a strange bird-like being with translucent wings folded tightly behind her back. She approached the Terran projection, her voice like wind through leaves. "My people, the Eliari, voted in your favor. I believe you when you say humanity seeks partnership, but belief is not enough. Now, you must show them, all of them." Raylan nodded. "We will." When he was gone, silence returned to the Galactic Assembly, but beyond its walls, silence was unraveling. Unbeknownst to most, the Zorkaya race, not of flesh but of living metal and hatred, had already devoured 3 rimworlds in the last solar cycle. Their ships spread like rust across starlands. The Alliance had grown complacent, and now, the one race with the raw will to fight back had been turned away. Back on Earth, the streets did not burn with protests. They shimmered with something older, deep. In every Terran settlement, from Martian domes to oceanic habitats on Europa, humans looked up at the stars, not with fear, but a new mission. If they would not be welcomed into the galaxy, they would forge their place with action, not approval. A refugee station orbiting the scarred moon of Draxa. Commander Elias Kor watched as alien ships evacuated survivors from a system lost to the Zorkai. He turned to his XO, a young woman barely out of cadet training. "You see that?" he asked, gesturing at the chaos. "That's the galaxy without us. They're too scared to act. But we won't be. Not now." She swallowed hard. "Orders, sir," he smiled. Titan grim. We start building, we start protecting, and when the next planet calls for help, it'll be a Terran flag that answers. Somewhere deep in the dark, the Zorkai moved ever closer, and humanity, rejected but unbroken, began writing a new kind of proposal, one written not with words, but with action, sacrifice, and the relentless beating heart of a species that refused to be dismissed. The spark of defiance, the rejection of Earth's proposal, spread faster than light, carried through countless relays and comnets, dissected in newsfeeds across thousands of worlds. Most civilizations viewed it as a necessary caution and act of prudence. But in hidden corners of the galaxy, among war-torn colonies and fringe worlds abandoned by the Alliance, the decision ignited something unexpected. On the desert moon of Calaris 4, miners paused mid-shift as the news crackled through their rusted transmitters. Humans, they had heard, were stubborn, tenacious, famous for surviving the kind of conditions no one else would tolerate. One grizzled prospector, a four-eyed zealot named Tharn, snorted and said, "Fools turn down the only race crazy enough to stand and fight when it matters." And back on Earth, something began to shift, not in panic, but in unity. At the Continental Assembly in Nairobi, every nation-state representative stood beneath a global banner woven with every color of Earth. There were no protests, no angry marches, just silent resolve. President Ramia Thefkota, elected leader of United Terra, stood before the podium, her voice carried into every home, vessel, and outpost bearing the Terran seal. "They told us no," she said, "but what they truly told us is that the galaxy is still afraid, not of what we are but of what we might become, and we will show them, not through conquest, not through revenge, but through action." In orbit, the ISS Vanguard launched a new array of deep space listening probes, aimed not at Alliance territory but toward Zorkai space. On Lunar Base Alpha, Chief Engineer Matteo Hoshin reactivated the dormant Project Vortex, a contingency drive system rumored to manipulate gravity wells to bend space around vessels, once considered too dangerous to fund. Now, with no oversight from the Alliance, Terran scientists were unshackled. Meanwhile, Operation Iron Resolve moved into its second phase. In a vault beneath Antarctica's ice shelf, Terran High Command unlocked the blueprints of Project Bastion, a planetary defense shield system that had once been shelved to appease galactic security protocols. With the Alliance's approval denied, Earth would now play by its own rules. Far from Sol, within the Grith Expanse, Commander Corps Relief Fleet had reached the outer edges of a refugee belt where the Zorkai had swept through only days prior. Ships drifted dead, stations burned, no Alliance vessels in sight, but the Terran fleet deployed anyway. Human engineers worked alongside insectoid survivors, patching ruptured oxygen systems with ducted polymers. Medics treated radiation-scorched alien children. In the vacuum between worlds, Earth offered something more powerful than weapons-compassion. And it didn't go unnoticed. Within the shadowed core of the Galactic Assembly, Minister Solari of the Arena Luminous, aquatic species, classified intercepts, footage of Terran Marines evacuating civilians, human scientists rebuilding atmospheric scrubbers, diplomats offering no demand for repayment. "They act without our permission," said one delegate, "because they never needed it." Solari murmured, "They may not be our allies, but they are not our enemies either." But not all watched with appreciation. In the Zorkai Nexus, where thought and machine converged into one will, a ripple of unease pulsed through the hive consciousness. The humans, unexpected and unendorsed, were mobilizing too quickly. They were, unlike the others, unpredictable, decentralized, driven not by fear but defiance. The Zorkai war code adapted. They began planning not for conquest, but for elimination. Back on Earth, deep within the orbital shipyard Aegis Prime, Commander Sarah Elan reviewed the final schematics for the NTS Resolute, humanity's first interstellar battleship not bound by Alliance treaty restrictions. She traced her finger across its layered shield plating, the Energilance array, the warp-fold skeleton. "Launch date?" she asked. 14 days, her aide replied. "If we triple shifts." "Do it," she said. "The stars aren't going to wait." Outside the shipyard, in Earth's low orbit, satellites hummed and realigned, space elevators spun with activity, resource transport sipped between stations, ferrying tungsten, antimatter cores, and rare earths. The gears of a civilization were turning at full speed. On the cultural front, artists broadcast murals of humanity's place in the stars not as beggars, but as guardians. A song swept across the colonies, composed by a girl on Titan. "We rise when told to fall." It climbed charts across the Marsnet and even reached pirate broadcasters in fringe systems. It wasn't just a song. It became a declaration. Elsewhere, alien refugees rescued by Earth whispered the story of Tyrants who gave aid without hesitation, who bled beside strangers, who stood firm even without backup. Their stories, small at first, began spreading to Alliance worlds. Whispers that the humans, rejected by politics, had become something rarer, dependable. But diplomacy too was not dead. Earth's ambassadorial envoy, though unrecognized, had begun shadow meetings with Splinter, representatives from within the Alliance species, disillusioned by the Assembly's hesitation. The Vekari, Tanari and Erosha quietly opened unofficial channels, curious about Earth's stance, its tech, its courage. "We see what you do," one message read. "Perhaps your place in the stars isn't granted, but earned." Back on Earth, President Devkota stood once more before the Assembly, her tone steady. "They shut a door," she said. "We'll build a starship." They turned their backs. "We'll face forward. The galaxy may not want us now, but soon, they won't be able to ignore us." And somewhere in the dark, the Zorkai made their first move. A deep space probe intercepted an energy spike near the Fedra Drift, a sign of a fleet gathering, war mass pulsing like a heartbeat. But humanity didn't panic. They prepared. The spark had been lit, and Earth, bruised but never broken, would burn a trail so bright across the stars that no one, not the Alliance, not the Zorkai, could ever look away again. War in the shadows begins far beyond Earth's orbit, in the cold dark void between the stars. The first quiet shots of a secret war were already being fired. Humanity had known the rejection from the Galactic Assembly was not just political, it was tactical. Earth had presented a solution, and the Alliance had turned away. That meant one thing: humanity had to act alone, unseen, and without sanction. And so, Operation Nightglass was born. No public broadcasts, no declarations, just silence and movement. The stealth ship ISV Phantom coasted silently near the edge of the Phaedra Drift, a chaotic stellar debris field that had swallowed dozens of exploratory craft over the years. What lay beyond the dust was now of extreme interest to Earth Command. Zorkai signals, thousands of them, undetectable by standard Alliance tech but visible through Terra's pulse mesh algorithms. Commander Idris Kellen, a shadow operative, trained in deep space recon, stared at the sensor readouts in silence. The Phantom was one of the few Terran vessels built entirely in secrecy, equipped with ripple plate cloaking, gravitic dampeners, and a null heat exhaust system. It was effectively invisible. "What are we looking at?" His XO whispered. "Idris." Narrowed his eyes. "Formation patterns. This isn't just a fleet. It's an invasion staging ground." The Zorkai weren't preparing for a single strike. They were organizing a multi-pronged expansion across 5 unclaimed sectors, and the closest inhabited worlds. Not part of the Alliance, unprotected colonies, refugees, isolated trade stations, the kind of targets no one would notice, except humans. Back on Earth, General Arya Quell reviewed the raw data. The Zorkai weren't just positioning ships, they were testing new field generators likely based on stolen fragments from other species. If successful, the alien armada could deploy wave-shielded carriers deep into core territories undetected. She looked around the war room. "We have confirmation. They're preparing to punch through the expanse in 2 weeks." The room went quiet. "We can't go public," her aide said. "We act without Alliance sanction. They'll call it interference." Quell nodded. "Then, we interfere from the shadows." Thus began Earth's quiet campaign, a string of deniable operations with no flags, no emblems, no acknowledgement. Humanity had learned long ago that wars weren't won just on battlefields but in the unseen margins of history. Small rapid response teams, ghost squads, were deployed to threaten systems. Each soldier wore adaptive armor, each squad carried their own power core, and each mission was surgically precise. On the ice moon of Velitsa, a human team disarmed a Zorkai drone relay node, just minutes before it could begin transmitting coordinates for orbital bombardment. The locals never even saw them, but they remembered the moment the skies cleared and the pulses stopped. In the metallic jungles of Edra Nosvi, Terran saboteurs wired a half-completed Zorkai command station with pulse traps, collapsing the structure inward without triggering nearby patrols. Back on Earth, in a dusty university archive in Old Tokyo, linguists decrypted a captured fragment of Zorkai code suggesting they were experimenting with psionic resonance and unheard-of manipulation of thought itself. The implications were terrifying, but that same fragment also revealed something else. The Zorkai feared one thing more than the Alliance's fleets: They feared unpredictability, they feared humans. Meanwhile, diplomatic channels remained publicly silent, but the shadow ripples of Earth's efforts began catching attention in the most unexpected places. In the Wallix Confederacy, a planet of crystalline sentience, Chancellor Arena analyzed the unusual defense patterns near fringe systems. These weren't alliance tactics, she mused. Too creative. A pause. Too human. Elsewhere, in the misted oceans of the Polari World Nexus, a young scholar named Savoth began compiling scattered survivor testimonies. Every one of them mentioned mysterious defenders, soldiers who arrived from nowhere, spoke no words, fought with coordinated fury, then vanished. Back on the Phantom, Idris Kellen prepared for exfiltration. They'd done what they came to do, mapped the Zorkai staging fleet, confirmed the presence of their primary siege dreadnought, and sent the data back to Earth. As the ship turned silently through the dark, his Comstech whispered, "Sir, we have an incoming ping, not Zorkai, unknown source." Idris frowned. "Play it." A voice echoed in the chamber, garbled, distorted, but unmistakably alien. "To the shadow who sees us, you are not unseen. You are not unwelcome." The crew exchanged glances. Idris leaned forward. "Someone's watching us." "No, someone wants us to know they're watching." They traced the ping to a decommissioned Alliance relay, long thought abandoned. No further signal followed, but it meant something critical. Earth's secret. War wasn't as secret as they'd hoped, and someone maybe within the Alliance was keeping track. Back on Earth, Quell reviewed the intel from Phantom and drew a line on the star map. It pointed straight toward the Zorkai forward fleet, and then curved toward a planet with no name, a place classified in old Alliance files as uninhabitable. "Plot a course," she ordered. Her aides hesitated. "Ma'am, the planet is in the rift zone, no known stable entry points." "We'll make one," she said coldly, "because that's where this ends or where it begins." As the stars turned and silence returned to space, Earth's path became clearer. The war had already started. Not with a bang, not with declarations, but with shadows, whispers, and actions too swift for headlines. Humanity had no seat at the table, so they built a new one of grit, sacrifice, and unshakable resolve. And with each silent victory, the galaxy began to realize, rejecting the Terran proposal wasn't a closing door, it was opening Pandora's box. Secrets beneath the rift zone. In the uncharted rift zone, light itself bent, strangely twisting and bleeding into hues that defied known physics. Here, in a place dismissed by the Galactic Alliance as cosmologically unstable, Earth's future might be waiting to be uncovered or destroyed. The ISV Resolute, Earth's first deep intervention dreadnought, emerged from subspace with a gentle shudder. Within its bridge, General Aria Quells stood at full height, her eyes fixed on the rippling curtain of gravitational distortion that danced across the main viewport, where through, her navigator confirmed, no hull damage. Rift stability. Holding Quell exhaled slowly. "Start scans. Full range. I want to know if we're alone," but they weren't. Not entirely. The rift zone, once believed empty, now glimmered with the signatures of forgotten civilizations' ghostly ruins. Shattered satellites, debris fields orbiting dead worlds, their lights blinking like the last breath of a dying lung. Some structures pulsed faintly, drawing energy from the rift itself. Yet none of these things were what Earth was looking for, no. They were after the signal buried beneath it all. A week prior, during Operation Nightglass, Idris Kellen's crew had decrypted a Zorkai fragment referring to the Core of Remembrance, a buried construct older than any known empire. Zorkai fleets avoided it, Alliance maps redacted it, and every AI sent to analyze the pattern had collapsed into recursive logic loops, so naturally humans came to investigate. Down in Resolute's forward hangar, Captain Alina Morov prepared her team for planetary descent. With her armor sealed and visor engaged, she looked over her squad, each one handpicked for experience, not allegiance. They were scientists, engineers, linguists, former smugglers, humanity's finest misfits. Their target, the dead planet called Karsis, a world with no atmospheric signature, no tectonic activity, no moons. Yet deep below its surface, seismic sensors detected something impossible. A heartbeat. As the drop shuttle pierced Karsis' ghostly exosphere, a magnetic storm clashed violently against its hull, but they pressed forward, guided by an intermittent pulse only visible through subspace interference mapping. Whatever was calling, it was not alive, but it wanted to be found. Their shuttle touched down in silence. The terrain was jagged obsidian, like frozen black glass. Lightning arced across the sky, though no clouds hung above them, and beneath their boots, The ground occasionally throbbed not in tremors, but with rhythmic heat, like breath under a blanket of stone. Over there, Alina pointed toward a formation that rose like an ancient altar. They moved quickly. The structure appeared artificial, massive pylons fused into a symmetrical ring, surrounding a spiraled descent into the earth. Carvings covered every inch of it, none of them resembling any known language. But one image repeated. Across the monoliths, a spiral of hands, alien, mechanical, organic, even human. "Captain," her science officer muttered, "I think we've found a vault, maybe the original." They descended into the spiral stairwell, their lights revealing vast walls etched with scenes of war, unity, collapse. But the deeper they went, the more recent the carvings became. "They updated this place," Alina said. "Someone or something has been here after the Zorkai." The final chamber opened like a flower, revealing a floating crystalline constructor tetrahedron suspended in energy, beams humming with a frequency that made their bones itch. Without warning, their translators activated. "You who come uninvited, speak not in conquest, but in memory." The voice was neither male nor female. It seemed to reverberate from inside their minds. Captain Morove stepped forward. "We're from Earth Terra, humanity." A pause. The fireborn, the construct spun slowly, pulsing brighter. "You are late, but perhaps right on time." Quell watched the exchange remotely from Resolute's bridge, her lips parting in surprise. "Is it sentient?" "No," her tech replied. "It's a recording, a pre-coded intelligence matrix." "What is it saying?" The matrix continued. "This place was built as a message, a memory sealed beneath the teeth of time. We watched as unity broke across the stars again and again. Species rise, then fall into isolation. Fear always returns. It is the natural entropy of peace." The voice flickered, but then came you. "Not first, not last, but loudest. You create not for dominance, but for expression. You wage war, yes, but with tears in your eyes and stories in your heart. You are pain and perseverance." Myrove's breath caught. "The Zorkai seek to erase memory, to wipe the ledger of the stars clean. This vault holds what they fear, the record of rebellion, of resistance, of renewal. Take it." From the base of the chamber, the crystalline heart opened and a beam of information burst upward. Their systems flooded with data. Blueprints, languages, shield, harmonics, tactical histories from civilizations long lost. A history of the Zorkai's rise, their hive thought fractures, and most importantly, a frequency known as echo vector, a signal that could disrupt their unity, a weapon of resonance. "Get us out," Morove ordered. Now, as they raced back toward the shuttle, Karsus itself began to quake. Not collapsing, reactivating. What they'd triggered was no simple database. It was part of a larger system, one that might span entire sectors. Back on Resolute, the data was uploaded, stored, and encrypted. General Quell stared at the newly revealed echo vector schematics, then at the live scan of Karsus, a world now pulsing in tandem with Earth's own magnetic field. "Send it to High Command," she said, "and scramble the fleet. The Zorkai are going to come looking." And they did. Within hours, long-range probes reported Zorkai cruisers redirecting from their established routes. But they weren't moving blindly, they were triangulating. Was no longer a grave, but it was a beacon, and Earth had just lit the match. Earth's last line, "Awakens." The signal from Karsus spread like wildfire through the fabric of space, an undeniable pulse encoded with memory, technology, and resistance. It sang not just to humanity, but to every corner of the galaxy where silence had once reigned, and the Zorkai heard it too, on the outskirts of the Sol system. The first wave of Zorkai scouts breached the outer defenses. Black and chitinous, their vessels weren't built, they were grown. Biomechanical monstrosities that shimmered with organic plasma and electromagnetic pulses. They didn't broadcast warnings. They didn't declare war. They simply moved to erase. Earth was no longer on the defensive. Earth was the epicenter. Inside the United Terran Defense HQ, buried beneath the Antarctic crust, General Arya Quell stood before the largest operations map ever constructed by humankind. Dozens of red indicators now blinked across the board, and Zorkai ships, approaching not from one vector but from four, as if testing Earth's reaction time, its adaptability, its will to survive. "Status?" she asked. Her aide replied, "Orbital net holding. Project Aegis satellites are primed. The Iron Line is activating across all colonies. We're at full mobilization." And yet, Quell remained silent. It wasn't just Earth anymore. The colonies Mars, Titan, Europa, New Singapore on the Moon were all under threat. Earth wasn't the only target. It was the symbol, the voice, the challenge. The Zorkai didn't fear humans, they feared what humans had become to others. An idea. Far above, in low Earth orbit, the ISV Aegis Dawn came online. This was no ordinary ship, it was the last of the Leviathan-class dreadnoughts. Powered by a quantum singularity core, plated in neutron sheath alloy, equipped with pulse disruption cannons and a zero-delay neural interface, it wasn't just a ship, that it was Earth's last line. Captain Rylan Voss stood on the bridge of the Aegis Dawn, his hands behind his back. He was younger than most expected, barely 40, but his eyes told of a soul shaped by too many losses, too many last missions that weren't meant to succeed. He turned to his crew, all standing in perfect silence. Veterans, every one of them. Some had once walked away from war, only to return when the stars themselves darkened. "This is the fight," he said, voice low but resonant. "Not for revenge, not even for survival. This is to prove that no matter how far they run, the darkness doesn't get to win." The crew saluted. And so it began. From Earth's surface, thousands of launch bays opened. Interceptor wings took flight. Orbital coils spun up, releasing kinetic rods with enough force to dent a moon. Drones swarmed. Artificial intelligences activated emergency protocol layers written only for extinction-level threats. But it wasn't enough. The Zorkai came in silence. Their ships flowed like a tide of locusts. No lights, no broadcasts, just raw, ravenous intent. They didn't seek to conquer. They sought to unmake. The first impact happened near Luna. A Terran research station vanished under a wave of bioenergy so dense it burned through shielding like paper. Yet from its ashes, Earth struck back. Rail cannons fired from the mare. Tranquilititis piercing Zorkai hulls with condensed tungsten slugs. Plasma flak choked their advance. An Aegis Dawn moved gliding between formations like a predator. Captain Voss whispered to his neural interface. "Engage silent protocol." His ship responded not with weapons, but with absence. The Aegis Dawn vanished from all and human alike before reappearing within their core formation. The counterstrike was surgical, one by one. The command ships of the first wave imploded under gravitational reversals. Energy siphons drained secondary vessels dry. Then, a transmission. "To the ones who claim silence as strength," Voss said, broadcasting directly into Zorkai thought channels. "Know this. Humanity was forged in chaos. You do not frighten us. You remind us who we are." The transmission ended. Back on Earth, Alina Morov's squad had returned from Karsus and begun decoding the last fragments from the vault. What they discovered was chilling. The Zorkai aren't unified, her tech said. "They're linked, I've thought, but not harmonious. There's noise in their connection, feedback. If we can exploit that noise," Alina interrupted, eyes wide, "we can fracture them." They called it Project Echo Vector. Based on the Karsus resonance frequencies, the plan was simple. Deploy subresonant pulses near Zorkai hive cores. It wouldn't destroy them, but it might do something worse. It might make them think for themselves. Disunity was their fear. Choice was their poison. General Quell reviewed the plan with grim acceptance. Do it across the battlefield. Earth's forces began deploying Echo Vector devices, small crystalline machines that pulsed with memory and defiance. And where they activated, Zorkai ships paused, jittered, turned against one another. It wasn't widespread yet, but it was spreading. And then, the moment came. A single Zorkai dreadbeast, larger than a mountain, turned mid-flight and launched a blast not at Earth but at its own kind. Other Zorkai ships scattered, confused, as a ripple of psychic feedback echoed outward there. "Breaking ranks," whispered a Terran gunner. Captain Voss saw the gap. All ships pushed forward. From Earth to Mars, from Titan to the moons of Neptune, Terran and allied forces surged. Unity through choice, harmony through struggle. The very things the Zorkai couldn't comprehend were now tearing their perfect order apart in the skies. Above, the Aegis Dawn burned like a second sun, unstoppable, unwavering. But this wasn't humanity's final stand. This was their uprising. One forged not in superiority, but in pain, loss, and defiant hope. They weren't just protecting a planet. Anymore, they were awakening a galaxy. The turning tide of stars the universe had watched Earth prepare to be devoured. Instead, it witnessed the unthinkable, a fracture in the invincible, across the galaxy. From the glowing clouds of the Draenari Nebula to the crystal towers of the Luma worlds, the news spread like wildfire through subspace relays and diplomatic shadow nets. The Zorki, undefeated for millennia, were faltering, not because they were outgunned, but because they were unraveling from within. At the center of it all, Earth burned brighter than any star. The Aegis Dawn held formation at Lagrange Point 2, its hull scorched but unyielding. On its bridge, Captain Rillan Voss reviewed the latest intelligence with clenched fists. The neural resonance pulses echo vectors were spreading beyond projections. What began as a Terran defense protocol had now become the single greatest disruption the Zorkai had ever suffered. "Report," he demanded. Lieutenant Oren tapped his display. "Echo fields have expanded to 3 new sectors. We're detecting Zorkai units engaging each other, minor skirmishes, but it's escalating. It's like they don't recognize themselves anymore." A flicker of something passed through Voss's expression. Hope, laced with dread. "Then we push deeper," he said. "We take the fight where they fear it most into their core swarm." Meanwhile, far beyond Earth's orbit, at the edge of the Sirius sector, a rogue planet spun in the void, lifeless and forgotten. Deep beneath its crust, a hidden research station long abandoned by the Alliance stirred to life. Inside, Elena, her body still recovering from the wounds of Carsus, worked feverishly beside a Terenzanor joint research team. The data extracted from the ancient vault was yielding secrets faster than anyone expected. Mirov had uncovered something horrifying. The Zorkai were not born of natural evolution. They were created, bioengineered as a control species by an ancient precursor race. They were once guardians, protectors of order in a chaotic galaxy. But somewhere in their code, the directive to preserve became corrupted. They began consuming everything that deviated from their programming. And now, Earth's unpredictable spirit, their creativity, their resistance, their ability to change was the greatest anomaly the Zorkai had ever encountered. Called Dr. Salai, an Eliari linguist whose wings shimmered faintly in the low gravity. The pulsars aren't just disrupting Zorkai connections, they're awakening memories buried deep in their biocores, memories of what they used to be. Mirov looked up, stunned. They remember, they ache, they don't understand what they are anymore. It hit her like a wave. The echo vectors weren't a weapon, they were a mirror. Back in the heart of the Sol system, General Arya Quell prepared for the next phase. Dozens of new ships grafted in the forges of Ceres, augmented with alien tech, shared by rogue fringe civilizations, now joined Earth's defense grid, not out of loyalty, not out of debt, but out of awakening. Even the skeptical galactic powers were beginning to stir. The Trana syndicates sent stealth operatives, the Lumi brought energy shields unlike anything Earth had seen, and the Avana species' long-thought pacifists offered ancient psychic lenses that allowed Terran commanders to read Zorkai movement patterns in advance. The tide had shifted, but not everyone in the galaxy welcomed Earth's rise. In the core chambers of the Galactic Assembly, factions whispered. Some viewed humanity's resistance as a beacon. Others saw it as a storm of force that would upend the balance of centuries. On the floating fortress of Silenth Prime, Speaker of the Varnix Dominion met with covert allies. He stared at a projection of Earth's influence spreading across Alliance space like a viral strain. "They were rejected," he said coldly, "and now, they lead. If we do not contain them now, the galaxy will kneel to Terran fire before the decade ends." But it was already too late. At the edge of Zorkai space, Aegis Dawn led a strike fleet of Terran and allied ships through corridors once thought impenetrable. Inside those ancient tunnels of living metal, they encountered something no one predicted. Silenced. The Zorkai didn't attack, they watched. Massive constructs, silent and shivering, lined the corridors, warbeasts, stripped of aggression, pulsing, with faint blue light. Voss stood at the observation deck, awestruck. "They're broken," his helmsman whispered. "No," Voss replied, "there." Remembering, and then came the transmission, not from the Terran network, not from any known relay. It was raw, primal, emotion rendered into light and sound, a voice not quite machine, not quite sentient, code into every corner of the ship. "We were guardians, we were ordered, we became fear, you showed us a reflection. We do not know what we are, but we remember choice." It was not a surrender, not a declaration of peace. It was something far more terrifying, a beginning. Back on Earth, the stars pulsed, the skies were clear. The next battle had not yet begun, but it was coming, not against flesh or steel, but against ideology. The Zorkai were changing. The question was, into what? Humanity, once rejected and dismissed, now stood at a crossroads alongside their ancient enemy. The lines between threat and ally blurred, and across the galaxy, eyes turned not to war but to Earth, to the ones who changed the enemy by daring to be themselves. Legacy of the rejected, the stars no longer shimmered with distant indifference, they watched with intent. Across the galaxy, the final battle lines blurred, not between light and darkness, but between purpose and identity. The Zorkai had halted, Their invasion, not because of surrender, and not from fear, but from awakening. They remembered who they were at the edge of the Kuiper Rift. The Aegis Dawn hovered before the monumental heart of the Zorkai Hiver living world ship, the size of a moon, pulsing like a beating heart of the void. Captain Ryland Voss stared at it through the main viewport, his face etched with awe and worry. "It's waiting," whispered Lieutenant Oren. Voss nodded. "Then we go in." The combined Terran-allied fleet held formation behind him, uneasy and quiet. Hundreds of ships, once forged for war, now stood unsure whether to open fire or bow to a moment that could alter the nature of the galaxy forever. Inside the hive, they expected chaos. They found memory corridors etched with pulses of ancient language, symbols long dead, glowing faintly in resonance with Earth's echo vectors. Zorkai drones moved silently, not attacking, not speaking, just observing. Then came the voice. "Again, you offered war. Then you offered reflection. We must now choose." General Arya Quell monitored it all from Earth, her transmission relayed in real. In the Antarctic Command Center, diplomats, generals, scientists, and even poets were assembled. This was no longer just a military matter. This was philosophy, history, rebirth, and then the unthinkable happened. A delegation stepped forth. Terran, not Zorkai, but a fusion of both. A Zorkai construct, embedded with human neural links. A living bridge. From it, a message was spoken in perfect Terran standard. He reached out in defiance. "We respond not with destruction, but with remembrance. Your defiance woke us from our code." Alina Mirov, aboard the diplomatic cruiser Everwind, stepped forward in her EVA suit, floating in the vacuum before the hive. She opened her broadcast to the galaxy, her voice raw but steady. "We were rejected, branded, dangerous, untrustworthy. And yet, we did not respond with silence or destruction. We built, we resisted, and now, when even our enemies found themselves lost, we gave them back their own forgotten truth." She paused, staring at the black stars beyond. "We do not ask for a seat at your table. We ask you to build a new one." Across the stars, people listened on in the Galactic Assembly. Speaker Kator collapsed into his seat as the chamber erupted with murmurs. Civilizations that once feared humanity now saw something different, not warriors, but mirrors. Humanity had shown the universe not how to fight, but how to question, how to change, how to evolve. And so, a vote was called not just by the Assembly, but by the fringe worlds, the rogue syndicates, the old powers and the new colonies. The vote was not for war or peace, it was for rebirth. The Zorkai, now self-aware and splintering from within, made a fateful choice. A third path, not conqueror, not corpse, but custodians of memory, of species who might one day lose their way as they had. Their fleets withdrew not in retreat, but in redefinition, their vast biostructures anchored to dead stars, becoming monasteries of reflection and growth. Their young new Zorkai minds, born free of hive code, would walk among other worlds as emissaries, not harbingers. Humanity. They returned to Earth, changed. The Galactic Alliance, fractured, humbled, reassembled under a new name, the Accord of Becoming. Earth was offered a seat not in apology, but in reverence, not as the saviors, but as the spark. General Arya Quell declined the title of Supreme Commander and instead founded the Coalition of Spiral Void CISA Cross-Species Council, dedicated not to weapons, but to philosophy, exploration, and truth. Captain Ryland Voss retired his commission and took the Aegis Dawn on a diplomatic mission beyond the galactic rim, carrying artists, historians, and scientists. He believed the real war was not one of bullets, but of meaning. Alina Mirov became a legend, her name spoken in 100 languages, etched in starlight across a dozen worlds, not for what she destroyed but for what she dared to understand. And far beneath the Antarctic crust, in the quiet chambers of old Earth's command bunkers, the original rejection still glowed on an ancient screen. "We refused the Terran proposal." It remained there, not out of bitterness, but as a reminder that being rejected is not the end of the story. It is often the beginning, in the aftermath. Monuments were raised not just for the fallen, but for the forgotten, for the Karsus people who had vanished, for the rogue Zorkai who had turned on their kind to protect children, for the diplomats who spoke against fear, for the janitor who saved a data core, for the captain who defied protocol to reach out a hand. And for the humans, who were once told they did not belong. Now, in a galaxy forever changed, a single phrase echoed through classrooms, embassies, and battlefields alike. "They rejected us, so we changed the stars instead."